Chapter 28. Man Overboard. Boom's face was pressed against someone's coat. He sat up and wiped drool from his chin. He was lying on the deck of Mr. Jorgensen's ship. He must have passed out, or maybe he had hit his head on something. His back ached, as did his legs, the sure result of having jumped off a cliff. The jump was the last thing he remembered. Just how long had he been knocked out? Myrtle lay next to him, snoring. The white fuzz had grown through her black sweater and pants and had so thoroughly transformed her that, had she not been wearing tennis shoes, Boom might have thought that the abominable snowman had come for a visit, which would be completely believable at this point in his life. Boom peered over the ship's rail. Where were they exactly? The cliffs of Fairweather Island could not be seen, nor any land for that matter. He remembered that the twister had been hot on his heels. Was it possible that the raging wind had carried the ship somewhere, just as it had carried his mother? The twister was gone, the rain had stopped, and the rays from the low winter sun fell like yellow ribbons across the calm sea. Boom turned to look for the others and found Captain Igor, Mr. Jorgensen, Halvor, and Mr. Broom strewn about the deck like fish out of water, limp and gasping for air. Had they all hit their heads from the force of the twister? Had it knocked the breath out of everyone? The sky showed no signs of the morning storm. In fact, there was no wind whatsoever, not a breeze, not a whisper, not even a sigh. A dandelion seed ball could have lounged on deck without worry of being blown overboard. The sea lapped at the sides of the boat as gently as a cat at its milk bowl. One could call it the calm after the storm, but only if referring to the weather, for a storm still raged inside of Boom. A storm of worry and anger. Worry for his sister's life, and anger at the universe for playing with his family as if they were nothing more than brine shrimp in a classroom beaker. Another twister indeed! Boom was about to check on his sister when a flash of blue-green darted past the boat. "The mer-baby! Hey!" he yelled as the baby arched her tail and dove below the water's surface. "Hey, what are you doing?" Boom's heart began to race. Was the creature going to swim away? Would she leave them behind and find her mother on her own? If so, there would be no one to remove Myrtle's curse. "You get back here right now!" The baby didn't pay any attention to Boom. She swam under the boat. "What's all the hollering?" Halvor complained, rubbing his head. "The mer-baby," Boom said, running to the other side of the boat. "It's in the water." Everyone except Myrtle woke with a start and ran to the rail. There was no time for grogginess or yawning, no time for "Where are we?" or "Does anyone know how I got this bump on my noggin?" The mer-baby was getting away. While Mr. Jorgensen's ship was a perfect replica of a Viking ship, from the curved prow to the square tail, it was, to be exact, 1/8 the size. So when everyone ran to look at the baby, the boat heeled. "There it is!" Boom cried, pointing at the little green head that poked up for a breath of air. The baby squirted some water from her mouth and dove under the boat again. "There it goes!" Boom ran to the port side. The others followed, tipping the boat as they went. "She be starboard again!" Captain Igor yelled, and back they ran. "Now she be port side!" Halvor and Mr. Jorgensen had to stop to catch their breath. They held their hands over their equally rotund stomachs as they gasped. "That's a very bad fishy," Halvor grumbled. Mr. Jorgensen's eyeballs rolled back and he moaned, "I don't feel so good. Everyone, stop rocking the boat." But Boom wasn't about to stop rocking the boat. He couldn't let that baby out of his sight. Back to starboard, he and Captain Igor ran. Mr. Broom, however, knelt over Myrtle, softly calling her name. "Oh, my little Myrtle, what has happened to you?" He hugged her. "She's awake," he told the others, "but she can't speak. Her mouth is all fuzzy." There had once been a time, many times in fact, when Boom had wished that his sister couldn't speak, when she had gone on and on about facts learned on Jeopardy, or on and on about something she had seen with the magnifying glass. But at that moment, not being able to speak seemed a very bad thing, because no one could know how Myrtle felt. No one could know if the mermaid's curse was nearing the end, Myrtle's end. Boom ran back to the port side as the baby dove again. "Get a net," Captain Igor ordered. "That be how I caught the wee rascal in the first place." "Ja, good idea," Halvor said. "Where's your net, Jorgensen?" Mr. Jorgensen opened a crate and pulled out a rolled-up fishing net. He took one end and began unraveling, while Halvor took the other end. Captain Igor slid a small telescope from his pocket and stood next to Boom. "There she be," he said, peering through the scope as the baby splashed in the distance. "We'll have to coax her in a bit closer. Bring the net, lads." Halvor and Mr. Jorgensen seemed to be having a bit of trouble with the net. They pushed and pulled like a game of tug-of-war. You're tangling it for sure, Halvor complained. Don't tell me I'm tangling it. I'm a direct descendant of Ned the net maker, and I know how to work a net. Mr. Jorgensen's arms were buried deep in the twisted mass of cord. You're the one tangling it. I'm not the one tangling it, Halvor bellowed. I'm a direct descendant of Fritz the fisherman, and networking's in my blood for sure. They glared at each other, puffing out their chests like feisty pufferfish. Stop doing that. You're making it worse. The net was now wrapped around Mr. Jorgensen's waist. I'm making it worse. Halvor's legs became so entwined that he fell over and landed on his bottom with a big thud. Mr. Jorgensen fell as well. The two started struggling like reject seafood. That'd be a sorry sight, Captain Igor said, shaking his head as the Viking descendants wound themselves up so tightly that they could no longer move. But Boom had something more important on his mind. That darn baby. She continued her playful behavior, frolicking from port to starboard, stopping every so often to cast a devilish look Boom's way. "Baby," Boom called out, "please come back." She seemed to be enjoying herself as she spun on her tail and somersaulted. If she swam away or got eaten by a shark, all would be lost. Myrtle would be lost. There was only one thing to do. Boom took off his coat and pulled off his black sneakers and socks. "She'd be changing course again," Captain Igor said, adjusting the scope. Boom stripped down to his underpants and undershirt, each equally full of holes and in need of a good washing. He looked over at Myrtle, who lay with her head resting against Mr. Broom's chest. Father and son stared into each other's eyes. For the first time, Boom felt that his own eyes held as much fear as his father's did. Then he turned and dove into the sea. "Boom, no!" Mr. Broom cried out. "Man overboard!" the captain yelled. It wasn't a graceful dive, half belly flop, half sprawl. Boom held his breath as the cold slapped him hard. How would the merbaby stand to swim in such icy water? Fish are cold-blooded, but humans are warm-blooded. She had to be mostly made of fish to endure such temperatures. He lifted his face for air and found himself looking straight at the merbaby. He wanted to yell at her to tell her that she was a bad baby for leaving the boat, but yelling might scare her away. Boom knew he wouldn't be able to take the cold much longer. He began to tread water, which he did quite well thanks to the advantage of his big foot. "Please come back to the boat," he begged. The baby did a somersault and began swimming circles around him. "Boom!" Mr. Broom yelled, starting to climb over the rail. The baby stopped swimming and growled. "No, Dad, you can't come in. You'll scare off the baby." But Mr. Broom kept climbing. "Dad, I'm fine. You've got to let me do this for Myrtle's sake." Mr. Broom paused, then reluctantly climbed back on deck. "I'm fine," Boom assured him. But Boom wasn't completely fine. An eerie thought came over him and his heart started to race. The merfolk had pulled Eric the Red's wife from Eric's ship and drowned her. Boom curled his toes, imagining hands reaching up from the murky depths to clutch his ankles. The cold pierced through his bones, making his legs ache. He reached out and tried to grab the baby, but she smacked his hand with her tail. "Boom!" Mr. Broom called. "Grab this!" A flotation ring landed with a splash nearby. "Baby," Boom said with a shivering jaw, "Myrtle needs you to come back to the boat." The baby shook her head and pointed. Boom turned and realized why the baby would not come back. At the bow of Mr. Jorgensen's replica ship on top of a crate sat a Viking helmet, a shiny Viking helmet that reflected the sun's rays like a beacon. "Captain Igor!" Boom yelled, clinging to the flotation ring. "Get rid of that helmet. It scares the baby." Mr. Jorgensen, though still entwined in the netting, managed to pop his head over the rail. "That helmet was worn by Engelbert the Explorer in the 5th century A.D. That helmet is priceless." "Vikings didn't wear horned helmets," Boom cried, remembering Myrtle's words. "It's not a real artifact." "What nonsense," Mr. Jorgensen said. "Everyone knows that Vikings wore horned helmets." "Ja, for sure," chimed Halvor. Captain Igor rushed to the bow and picked up the helmet. "It says made in China." "Get rid of it," Boom pleaded. Desperate to get out of the cold, his head felt as if it were being squeezed in a vise, and he couldn't feel his lower half at all. Captain Igor tossed the helmet into the sea as Mr. Jorgensen screamed like a girl. "My helmet! Ah!" Boom wiped seaweed from his face. "Now will you come back to the boat?" The baby grabbed the flotation ring and nodded. Like a speedboat, she propelled them back to the Viking ship. End of chapter 28.